My monastic name is Lumbini Sudattabalo. My conventional name is Jacob Murphy. I'm 33 years old and I'm from England. So it's a bit of a long story, but actually I started getting into Buddhism when I was 29. The reason for that was I was living a very Western lifestyle. I had a good career, I had a nice house, I had a car, I had all the worldly possessions that one could need to be comfortable, but still I didn't feel happy. When I was 29 years old, I decided to stop drinking alcohol. I'd had enough of the partying lifestyle. I'd had enough of this kind of way it just felt like I was existing. And due to this, I went in search of something more, to find true happiness, to discover who I am and to try and discover the true nature of reality. Along the way, I was introduced to Buddhism by a book. The book was called The Joy of Living by a monk called, or a lama should I say, called Yongey Mingyur Rinpoche. So after reading this book, it just filled me with inspiration and the desire to want to know more. As I've progressed throughout the last 3.5 years, I've been meditating alongside the Buddhist tradition. And the more I meditated, the more I realised actually the true nature of this life. I realised that actually we have this precious human body, this life in this form, for this one lifetime. Next life, who knows? We might not be born as a human again. This human life is the only life where you can actually practice the Dharma to actually fulfill, to try and purify our minds, fulfill our ultimate goal of reaching Nirvana. Also, another teaching on death and impermanence was really hit home for me. The teaching was, we can die at any time. Everything's changing moment by moment. Life isn't guaranteed. Time isn't guaranteed. So what do I want to do with that time? We've got this one precious human life in this lifetime and limited time. So what do I want to do with it? And then if you look at the Four Noble Truths that the Buddha taught, the Four Noble Truths are all suffering. Our existence is suffering. Or if you translate dukkha into a different way, unsatisfactory conditions, which is I think something we all suffer from. So the more I analysed the Buddha's teachings and the more I analysed my own life, the more I realised that actually I was suffering. My life wasn't satisfactory and I wasn't happy. So this was what gave me the motivation and the inspiration to carry on following the Lord Buddha's teachings. In the West, we have many material possessions. We have a lot of comfort. You know, I mentioned earlier I have a nice house, or had a nice house, had a nice car, had a good job. I was very fortunate in that respect. But actually it was these possessions I felt that brought comfort, not happiness. And for me, whilst travelling, I realised this when looking at a lot of Eastern people from Nepal, people from India, Thailand, Cambodia. I've stayed on farms, in homestays, in more rural areas where people don't necessarily have the same level of material possessions that I had in England. But actually the people seem a lot more happy, a lot more genuine. And I believe this is down to a lot of the places I've been to have been Buddhist areas where they do follow the 5 precepts or the 8 precepts. So for me, happiness isn't a geographical location. Freedom isn't a geographical location, but happiness and freedom both come from the mind. I don't think it actually matters what region you live in, what area, how poor or rich you are, whether you're black, white, what religion you are, whether you're Muslim, Christian, Hindu. True freedom, I believe, comes from the mind. And for me, this is what I love about the Buddha's teachings. Yes, Buddhism is a religion, but some people also say it's a philosophy. But for me, it's actually a way of life. Meditation is a cultivation of the mind. It's a philosophy of the mind. It's to know yourself. It doesn't matter what religion you are, where you come from. But actually meditation, for me, is one of the most profound tools which has made me and helped me to transform my life. So for me, I feel this is why people in the East are a lot happier. It's ingrained in not necessarily the religion, but the way of life. Having less, having more time though, because when I believe you have less, you have more free time. You're not confounded, you're not restricted by having to pay a mortgage, having to work long hours. You know, for me in the West, there was a lot of suffering, but it wasn't physical. We weren't deprived. We weren't starving. We didn't have these issues. We were very fortunate, but actually we were suffering from our minds. You know, the mind for me is something that actually everything comes from the mind. The mind is ultimately what gives us our existence, our illusion of the world. Everything comes from our interpretation, our conception. Everything comes from our own mind, how we see something. So for me, it's this cultivation of mind, which can lead from a negative mind to a positive one, or an impure to a pure, or unwholesome to a wholesome. And I genuinely believe the happiness in the East is down to this cultivation of mind, not the location or the possessions one owns. Originally, I had planned to go to a Mahayana temple in France, as Mahayana, the Tibetan tradition, was the first tradition that I discovered, like as I mentioned earlier, through Yongey Mingyur Rinpoche's book, The Joy of Living. But unfortunately there were some restrictions with the notice that I had and obtaining the visa. So the course should have started in September, but unfortunately I was unable to make it. I was unable to start. But for me, this was a sign. This was actually, I believe everything, if you look at Buddhism or just in life, everything depends on a cause and condition, the law of causality, dependent origination. So I don't believe anything's actually an accident. Everything happens for a reason. So it was after my stay in Nepal and after hearing the news regarding the visa application, it would take many months for a long stay visa to go to the monastery in France that I was meant to reside at. But then I came to Thailand to experience Theravadan Buddhism. I'd already had some experience of the Mahayana tradition, so I wanted to experience Theravadan Buddhism, which is one of the biggest schools in the world actually, and it's a school of the elders. But I didn't know how to go about it, so I was travelling around Thailand and I ended up actually at a meditation retreat. And it was at this meditation retreat where I heard about iMonastry, and we had the option to come and ordain as a monk, not for life but for a set period dependent on how we felt. So for me, due to my love and passion of Buddhism, it was something that I really wanted to do. So I grasped the opportunity, or grasp is maybe the wrong word, but I took the opportunity to come and experience it. Buddhism in its most purest form, as a monastic, as a monk, as a bhikkhu. So ultimately, when I sold my house, my car, all of my possessions and quit my job, I had a purpose in mind. The purpose was, or the reason that I started to travel, was actually because I wanted to delve deeper into the Lord Buddha's teachings. I wanted to experience them as much as I could, not just for my benefit, but for the benefit of all living beings. Because actually, through the time I've spent meditating, in the 3.5 years, it's a very short time actually in terms of meditation, but the changes I saw in myself were so profound. Actually, my mind was a lot more stable, a lot calmer. Life became easy. I didn't have any stress, any worries, even while I was working, paying a mortgage, doing these worldly things people say that should be stressful. It was just, life became easy because, I realised life is life. We can't control the external world. We can only control our reaction to it. So for me, I just can't see any other more beneficial way to spend my life other than studying Buddhism for my benefit, and then in the hope that one day I can teach it to others to try and help others and benefit their lives. Because actually all the problems in the world, all the wars, all the suffering, it all comes from the mind. Everything comes from the mind. Our whole existence is cultivated by the mind. We can imagine something. Example, the monastery I'm staying at now. At some point somebody imagined this and then they dreamt it, they came up with this idea, and then a team of people came together, humans like me and you, and this was built, this was created, but it all started as a seed in someone's mind. So imagine if all the negativity in the world, all of the wars, all of the hardships that also come from somebody's mind could be changed from from a negative mindset to a positive one, to cultivate happiness, to cultivate purity, to cultivate compassion. Imagine how beautiful the world could be. And that's my driving force behind what I'm doing, not just for myself, but for all living beings, to try and make the world a better place. Yes, so for all of the Nepalese people, I'd just like you to know that actually, although I'm sat here as a Theravadan monk, as a Buddhist monk, my journey actually started through a foundation called the FPMT, the Foundation for the Preservation of the Mahayana Tradition. They are based in Nepal, in Kathmandu at Kopan Monastery, although they do have centres worldwide. I'm not here to promote one organisation or the other, as I'm now sat at iMonastry, as a Theravadan monk. But actually what I am here to try and promote is Buddhism. Buddhism has the same teacher, whether you're Theravadan, Mahayanan or Vajrayanan. We are all the same, all Buddhists. It comes from one teaching, one master, the Lord Buddha. So my advice would be, it doesn't matter what school, if you can't come to Thailand, if you don't have the means, or even if you don't have the means to get to Kathmandu. For example, in Chum Valley, there are many great Gompas across the whole of Nepal and India. There are so many Gompas, so many Rinpoches, so many masters. There are many great masters in all traditions, but they all come from the greatest master, the Lord Buddha. So my advice to you would be, find a local centre, seek out a local guru, ask them, analyse the teachings, ask them for sutras, ask them for commentaries, ask them for information. Practice meditation. Even if you are from a different tradition, you shouldn't convert to Buddhism, you shouldn't leave your own tradition. But I'd advise you to definitely take up meditation. As like I said earlier, for me, meditation is a key to purifying the mind, to having a happy life. Even if you don't believe in future lives or previous lives, what meditation can do is give you a happy life now, in this lifetime, until the day you die.